Hello, this is Michael Paul with New Orleans Scottish Rite College. I'd like to do a video today that takes a look at what's inside a new book of mine, the Scottish Rite Papers. This is a book that has been in the works for really some 35 years now. The book pulls together research of mine into the early years of the Scottish Rite with a focus on the fascinating Louisiana Scottish Rite. The early history of the Scottish Rite is a complex story. I believe that the stage has to be set to properly understand the events. I'd like to come at this story from somewhat around the block. I will also not be pulling punches as to my conclusions. When I was a boy, my reality was that there were monsters living under my bed. If I got up at night, I knew that I would be eaten alive and die a horrible death. As I grew older, I began to realize that my reality was faulty. There was nothing under my bed except dust and a few things that had rolled under to be forgotten. The monsters that I had so feared in my childhood simply did not exist. But as I grew into adulthood, I learned that other monsters did indeed exist. Ego, envy, jealousy, lust for power and titles, as well as many other lesser qualities of man existed. They found a home in more people, more Masons, than we might have expected. Like an infection, they could enter anyone at any time and destroy not only their lives, but the lives of others. I believe that the Masonic phrase, "subdue your passions," applies to our quest to improve ourselves and fight these monsters within. There is a common thought that before anyone can solve a problem, they must first acknowledge that a problem exists. This is true for the individual or a group. Because Freemasonry is composed of human beings, we must recognize that we can and do make mistakes. The whole premise of Freemasonry using symbolic tools to improve ourselves highlights the fact that we are not perfect and we do need improvement. We are human. We can't expect that we will always live up to the pure Masonic philosophy. But if we are sincere in our claim of being seekers of light, desiring working towards improvement, then we must acknowledge past failures. We must be honest with ourselves. We must know what is inside of us that needs improvement. We must grow. Once we acknowledge missteps, we can move past them and continue our path to improvement. If we refuse to acknowledge problems or deny them, then we become bound to our flaws and they will define us. Our path can change from difficult to impossible. Insecurity plagues most all of us, even if we refuse to acknowledge it. We want to do good. We want to be successful. And yet we question our abilities and fear that whatever we do may not be enough to accomplish our goals. A deep concern seems to be that if we try and fail, then we will open ourselves up to harsh criticism from others. Our reward for trying to be of service is to be attacked. On the surface, this seems to be a rational concern. But it is when insecurity overtakes us and we fall out of balance that problems can arise. Ideally, insecurity and ego should play off each other in order to keep each other in check. Ego tells insecurity that what we do is indeed of value, and insecurity tells us that we are not perfection itself. In proper alignment, they create balance. When out of balance, insecurity can explain our success by reasoning that supporters of ours may only be fools, not capable of understanding or seeing our obvious inabilities. Unchecked ego can explain failures as any who do not see our work as pure perfection, simply being jealous and refusing to see our superior skills. Reality becomes skewed, and we may see monsters where none exist. I've been a Scottish Rite Mason for over 40 years now. I remember the day I joined like it was yesterday. To say that I was impressed with the philosophy and symbols of the Scottish Rite is about as great an understatement as possible. I knew instantly that I was home in the Scottish Rite. But as time passed, I began to see that something was amiss. The philosophy and the organization began to grow further and further apart. Good men joined, and some rose quickly in its ranks. While they appeared to be competent and even successful at running an organization at times, many also seemed to be woefully ignorant of the philosophy and teachings of the Scottish Rite. In time, it became clear that the Scottish Rite leadership qualities seemed to be the ability to attend meetings, not to give trouble, and be in the inner circle. Understanding of the ritual and philosophy was not at all required, nor did it even seem important. Like far too many lodges, the Scottish Rite had become a social club with a breathtaking but mostly ignored philosophy. The carrot that was so often dangled was, show up, make us look good, keep things going, and you too may get shiny rewards and one day be a somebody like us. Those who understood the philosophy found this environment disturbing. Attendance went on the decline. Very few were truly happy. The blame game followed, with everyone pointing fingers. The situation was the fault of someone else. That guy over there didn't do as he's told. This guy didn't support us. On and on the excuses were made. Ego and insecurity were out of control. So where did we go wrong? How did we go wrong? And what can we do? Maybe taking a look at the early days of the Scottish Rite is useful. If we understand a bit of yesterday, it can possibly help us today. At the very beginning, a disclaimer is needed. In order to write about the early history of the Scottish Rite, a good deal of speculation is necessary. Because so very little of the necessary documentation and original records have survived, researchers must fill in the blanks with their best guess. Conjecture as to unknown and unprovable events is the only way to have a coherent historical account. Over the years, an opinion-based narrative has been created by supporters of the First Supreme Council. While from time to time the narrative is tweaked, it is the core of our official history. And yet, all that is written is based on merely a handful of available documents and a favorable storyline by the writers. Researchers can state with reasonable conviction that the First Supreme Council of what would become known as the 33-degree Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite was created on May 31, 1801 in Charleston, South Carolina. But so very much else surrounding that event is a matter of opinion. Much of this book deals with examining claims made by this First Supreme Council. In the absence of sound evidence, logic is applied. The horribly sad aspect of my many years of research into the Scottish Rite is reading accounts of the wars, and there's no other word for it, that broke out over the legitimacy or lack of it by various groups claiming the authority to work in this new rite. The tactics and mindset of the members on all sides of these wars resembled more of the attitudes of children or anti-Masons. The Charleston Supreme Council, today Southern jurisdiction, was relentless and unyielding in its denunciation of anyone who they did not find to be legitimate. Let's look at this situation. To understand the creation of this new 33-degree system, we need to go back to the years prior to its invention. There existed a meaningful 25-degree French Masonic Rite coming out of the West Indies called the Order of the Royal Secret, but more often known as the Rite of Perfection. This was a beautiful symbolic system, but it had organizational problems. Simply put, the organization was in a state of chaos. The ones mostly in charge, deputy inspectors general, were more or less free agents. In other words, they did pretty much whatever they wanted with little to no clear or firm supervision. Because they had only a loosely based central authority to supervise them, problems developed. In an effort to keep the heart of this beautiful system, but remedy the who is the boss problem, a few Masons gathered in Charleston, South Carolina around 1801 to discuss the situation. Among them was John Mitchell, who held the 25th degree of this older system. A new organization was created by these Masons based on a reported collection of documents giving them the authority to create bodies of this new Masonic Rite. This collection of documents became known as the Grand Constitutions of 1786. This new system was designed to bring order out of the chaos of the older one. Many of the degrees and rituals of the older system were preserved, and additional ones from other rites were added. Instead of being another 25-degree organization, this new system expanded into 33 degrees. The birth certificate of this new rite provided the names and various degrees in which they intended to work, and an interesting history and explanation of how and why the system was created. In addition, the published birth certificate spoke of the original Supreme Council of the 33rd degree being created 15 years earlier, 1786, in Berlin. This new 33-degree system was said to be authorized and approved by a European king, Frederick the Great, who died shortly after these constitutions were approved. No information concerning other additional Supreme Councils having been created anywhere else in the world was given. From all that can be told from the birth certificate, the creation in Charleston was the first Supreme Council created outside of Berlin. John Mitchell was named as a Sovereign Grand Commander. Following this council in Charleston, several Supreme Councils would be created in the West Indies, and then the new rite would move to France, Europe, and the rest of the world. In 1806, a Mason by the name of Joseph Cerneau created bodies in New York which would become a Supreme Council of the 33rd degree of what would seem to be the same system, or same intended system, that was created in Charleston. It is likely that Charleston initially knew nothing of the Cerneau creation. In 1813, a member of the Charleston Supreme Council traveled to New York and discovered this new unauthorized 33-degree body. This was the start of a long, disastrous period in U.S. Masonic history. What followed was a nearly half-century of Masonic fighting as to who were and who were not legitimate Scottish Rite Masons, and who had the authority to create a Supreme Council. The whole of the 33-degree system was itself questioned as to its legitimacy. Arguments on both sides of this question have been presented in this book, along with my own observations. Joseph Cerneau was clearly the fly in the ointment for the young Charleston Supreme Council. At some point between 1801 and 1806, Cerneau traveled to Charleston and would seem to have learned of this new 33-degree system. There is no record of who Cerneau may have met with in Charleston or who told him about the new system. Like John Mitchell, Joseph Cerneau was a member of the older Order of the Royal Secret and also held the 25th degree. It seems logical that Cerneau felt that he had every right to create these bodies that he created. Charleston disagreed. If you look at what Cerneau created, he clearly knew about this new system, felt he had authority to create these bodies, but may not have quite remembered all of the details. Instead of calling a body of the 32nd degree a Grand Consistory, Cerneau called it a Grand Council. Instead of calling a body of the 33rd degree a Supreme Council, Cerneau called it a Sovereign Grand Consistory. I have no idea if Cerneau took notes in Charleston or if he tried to remember all of the details, but he dropped the ball in a few areas. In 1813, Emmanuel de la Motta traveled to New York and found Cerneau. In a nutshell, de la Motta wanted to find out if Cerneau possessed the right to establish Scottish Rite bodies. He asked Cerneau for his 33rd degree patent. Cerneau didn't have one. De la Motta reported back his findings to John Mitchell and Frederick Delco, the Charleston Grand Commander and Lieutenant Grand Commander. Both Mitchell and Delco labeled Cerneau a fraud. But why? Because he didn't have a 33rd degree patent? Mitchell has never been shown to have one either. Both Mitchell and Cerneau elevated themselves to the 33rd degree because of their holding the 25th degree in this earlier system and the Grand Constitution of 1786. The charges made against Cerneau are given in a chapter in this book, The Grand Constitutions of 1786. If Mitchell and Delco believed the story of the Grand Constitutions, then how could they be so sure that Cerneau did not receive the same permission that they received? Why would they doubt him so quickly and not give him the benefit of the doubt? Why would de la Motta ask Cerneau for something that he should have known that Mitchell did not have either? Maybe there's a good reason. Maybe Mitchell and Delco knew that Cerneau acquired the system without permission because they created it. If Mitchell and Delco and whoever else created the whole story about Frederick, the Grand Constitutions, and the whole 33-degree system, then they would know that Cerneau had to have learned of it while he was in Charleston. Someone in the Charleston camp clearly had loose lips. But really, who told Cerneau and where he learned of the new system is not at all that important. He learned of it somewhere and acted on what he felt was his right. The Charleston members could have legitimately seen Cerneau as stealing what they created. But I believe they were in a self-made trap. But really, what could the Charleston Supreme Council do in regard to Joseph Cerneau? Cerneau may not have had a 33rd degree patent, but he did have big guns. His Lieutenant Grand Commander was the sitting Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of New York. Great care had to be taken, as the members of the Charleston Supreme Council were not on firm Masonic ground. Masonic politics, especially in New York, seemed to be on the side of Cerneau. If it came out that the Charleston Council had made up the whole story of the Grand Constitutions, then they might have been in worse shape than if they had just claimed authorship from the start. If we look at it as if they created the whole story, then maybe they felt that an all-out attack on Cerneau designed to completely discredit him was the best course of action. While I might disagree on that tactic, attack they did. A good bit of this book addresses documented as well as undocumented events and examines them for facts and logic. I believe that the members of what would become the Supreme Council Southern Jurisdiction USA created an inspired, beautiful, and workable system. I believe that they did so for exactly the reasons stated in their motto, to bring order out of the chaos of the old order of the Royal Secret. The new system was head and shoulders superior to the old one. Just the fact that the 33-degree system exists to this day, while the 25-degree one has faded away, is a testament to its value. But I also believe that insecurity overcame the creators. They may have felt that their creation might not be accepted. The monsters under the bed must have kept them up at night. The value of any new Masonic system is subjective. It is not unreasonable to believe that the authors held valid concerns that any new homegrown system would be dismissed or even outlawed. They did not have the benefit of 200 years of existence to judge its success. As the Bible tells us, no prophet is accepted in his hometown. Such concerns about acceptance are understandable. I believe that the most logical scenario was that the Charleston Masons felt that there was great value in the rituals and philosophy of the old order of the Royal Secret. Perhaps they held concerns that any new ritual and system submitted for approval would have little chance of acceptance. But a well-thought-out system that carried the stamp of approval of a European king might have a far greater chance of becoming accepted. By an examination of all the available records, I believe that they created the entire story of the Grand Constitutions, Frederick's approval right before he died, and the entire ritual blueprint. It was truly inspired, and it did work. It was a lie, but it was a lie with good intentions. Then came Joseph Cerneau. The Charleston Supreme Council may well have felt shock and upset if they believed that all their work was being taken without permission by someone else. But the trap that they had set was that they did not claim themselves as the creators. They simply said that they were authorized by these constitutions to create their Supreme Council. This left the door open for anyone with like credentials to establish bodies of the same system in accordance with the Grand Constitutions, as Joseph Cerneau did. The arguments advanced between Albert Pike and Josiah Drummond in the Grand Constitution chapter of this book provide an interesting look at this situation and the dispute. Many times in trying to solve a puzzle or find an answer, the simplest solution is the right one. I believe that they made up the story of their creation out of fear that it would not be accepted. They made a mistake in judgment. Once Cerneau acted, Then they made more mistakes. Rather than simply embracing him, they went on the attack. I imagine that once they started lying, they found it difficult to decide on the best course of action to take, and they fell deeper into their own trap. Once the war started, it was even harder to stop because they did not want what they created to be taken from them or fall apart in disgrace. By the 1820s and early 30s, the wars had taken such a toll on all parties involved that the only body of high-grade Scottish Rite Masonry left active in the United States was the Grand Consistory of Louisiana. In 1839, the Supreme Council of Louisiana was created. The sad tale of intolerance, bigotry, and closed-mindedness that invaded Louisiana during that time nearly destroyed Freemasonry in the state. The Louisiana account is retold in this book. The 1800s were a devastating time for the philosophy of Freemasonry in the United States. We set up policies that denied Freemasonry to those who were not the correct skin color. Brother ruthlessly attacked brother time and again. We insisted on ownership of, rather than being a part of, all Masonry within geographical borders. We wanted one ritual, one language, and one Grand Lodge per state. The simple, painful truth is that we did not practice our own teachings. Ego ran rampant. Titles, rank, and power became a drug for far too many. Yes, we gave money to charities, but we did not teach our members how to advance in the moral philosophy of Freemasonry. We became a club. But over the last 20 or more years, we have begun to see that we can be better than in the past. We have been growing in spirit. We acknowledge mistakes. We recognize flaws in our old accepted ways. Today, most jurisdictions in the United States enjoy fraternal relations with the Prince Hall Grand Lodge in their state. We recognize that mistakes were made, and we overcame the thinking of the past for the betterment of all. We can do what is right and what is best for the whole of Freemasonry. We are slowly looking to our teachings. When I began the research that has led to this book, I was stunned at the various positions taken by Masons on all sides of the regularity questions concerning the Scottish Rite. Some positions were accepted and declared fact, with not a single scrap of evidence in support. They only offered opinion, presented as fact. Other positions were pronounced fact, and yet they are known today to be total fabrications. The ability to so strongly and so officially state something as fact with nothing at all in support of such statements caught me off guard. I thought we were better than that. Because I would see time and again known errors boldly proclaimed as fact, I began to treat everything written as suspect. It was clearly a time of great emotion, and while it is clear that there was great passion for advancing fact, it also calls into question the ability to know fact from fiction. What I also found deeply disturbing were the times when a falsehood or error was used as support for several truths. The goal would seem to be to hide a mistake behind a cover of truth. Truth built on a falsehood does not make the entire argument anything but unreliable. Such a situation is not in keeping with the system built on the claim of integrity. Another common practice was to ignore 5 important proven facts to focus on one unimportant error. In either case, the result was fog and confusion. We should examine all that is correct and all errors under the same light. The goal should be to understand and know, not employ clever tactics to win an argument. The Scottish Rite has always been a profound system of moral values, offered in a manner designed to infuse students with a desire for gaining more light. But I believe that the organization stepped off on the wrong foot and has damaged or cracked the window from which light enters. I don't believe that it is an error that is impossible to fix, but it is one that will grow and remain as an impediment to our ultimate success. We need to repair the errors of the past. Bitter medicine may be necessary. I believe with all my heart that the Scottish Rite needs to rediscover its true purpose in Freemasonry by taking a good, long look at itself in the mirror. Only by embracing those on the same path, clearly identifying fact from opinion, and ceasing to throw rocks at kindred spirits, will the Scottish Rite become what it always should have become. The Scottish Rite was never designed to be a club to make big shots. It is a profound philosophy that teaches us the path to becoming better Masons and better human beings. Monsters may indeed live under our beds, but knowledge destroys them. Thank you for watching. If you like the videos, please hit the like button and subscribe to us. See you next time.